And welcome to this Wednesday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Very happy to have you guys with us as we're getting into the exciting time here, both on the college and the professional football level. Interesting, too, last night. We have a great basketball game on tap tonight. We're going to try and catch up with Troy West here and see what he thinks about laying 2.5 with the Cleveland Cavaliers in their game against Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City and the Cavs both on double-digit winning streaks. Two best records by far in the NBA so far this year. I believe OKC's 30-5, the Cavs 31-4, and they're going to go head-to-head tonight with that winning streak for both clubs on the line, and 2.5 points, the favoritism being accorded to Cleveland, the Cleveland Cavaliers at home against OKC. We'll try and get into that for you on the show as well. One of the great things, and in the NBA last night, and this is terrific, and we can relate to this being from South Florida. I was fascinated by the game of Highline when I first moved to South Florida from California. Hadn't seen it before. It was played at the highest of levels here in both Miami and in Fort Lauderdale at Dania Highlight. And then, of course, there were other frontons around the country where the level of play was not quite as good, but still, it was one of the most exciting games. The pelota travels at speeds up to 150 miles per hour. But what was great about that from a sports fan and a degenerate standpoint was you would find yourself, you could switch allegiance from one team to another in a matter of moments, where one minute you're rooting for the one to win a point, and the next minute the last thing you need is the one to win another point. So you would just change the allegiance that you had and the rooting interest that you had on a certain team. And that was the case in this game last night with Oklahoma, not Oklahoma, rather Utah, taking on the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks are leading by 3 points with a couple of seconds to go in a ball game. Utah, rather, who's been awful all season. I don't know why I want to make Utah Oklahoma. That they're certainly diametrically opposed in terms of performance so far this year. But the Utah Jazz make a three-pointer with about a second and change to go in a ball game, tied a game. Now, if you're betting this game, you were laying 5 if you were on the Hawks, and you're getting 5 if you're on Utah. So you're asking yourself, hey, the last thing I need is overtime in this spot. And sure enough, you have the tie ball game now. If you're trying to root the Hawks in, it's your only chance to survive. If you're rooting for the Utah Jazz to cover the point spread, which would have taken some serious balls to go ahead and take just 5 points in any game with the Utah Jazz. They've been horrible this year. The last thing you need is this game to go to overtime. You would have had the game covered if the guy threw up a brick there from the corner. He makes it, and of course, Trae Young, while you're thinking maybe you got a reprieve, a late call from the governor, like Carol Chessman in those movies many years ago, where 8 times they put him in a gas chamber, and 8 times the phone rang at the last second, and some stodgy old guard, you got the call from the warden, hey, Whitey, get him out of there. So you think you're out of the jam, and sure enough, Trae Young sinks a half-court shot like he was Jerry fucking West. 49-footer, they labeled it, and it goes in. And now the Hawks win. They fail to cover the spread, so if you were backing them, you lose. And if you were a Utah better, then you end up in the black. So interesting that your allegiance could change, because the last thing you needed if you were a Hawks fan, of course, or rather a Utah fan, what was the game to go to OT, where the Hawks what happens there, right? You end up losing by 6 points or whatever, and fouling up what otherwise would have been a winning bet. Now, if you aren't betting, BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. You want these guys on your side. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, the NHL, UFC, boxing, BetOnline is the number one source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and tricks, BetOnline has you covered on virtually every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the all right, we're going to be joined here by Troy West. Right now, I think we only have Troy from an audio standpoint. As he came on here on screen, he appeared to be in a perpendicular position or some oddball sexual position that would be not necessarily relative to normal moral good taste and ethical good taste. Troy, did you get that camera adjusted here? Because
I'm fixing it as we speak. You know I'm going to have to talk to Leslie on this one. I don't know why the camera when I go to the side, it goes upside down. Doesn't matter what radio show I've been on lately, Defo. I don't know what is going on with it.
Okay, all right. No, we do have you from an audio standpoint, and you have to be getting very excited. Although, from what I've been able to decipher and deduce from your posts on social media, there you are. See, now
We
we
are
get the
here.
full impact of the great Troy West. And welcome back, by the way. Happy New Year, my friend. Good to have you on the show here in 2025.
Thank you so much for having me, Defo. It's great to be back.
All right, and you've been really hitting lately. I don't know what you've been diving into. What, college basketball, the pros? You've been having yourself a really good time for you and all your clients there at Troy Winds.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. We even got golf that started up. The Century was last week. We've got the Sony this weekend. College basketball, hockey. UFC's back in action this weekend. We cover it all. College football playoffs. It's gonna be one of the better weekends of all time sports. So buckle up and enjoy it.
Oh, no doubt, and begins the football action begins tomorrow night right here in town in Miami as the Orange Bowl will be contested, and you do have Penn State and Notre Dame. I thought Notre Dame was a viable play, especially when they were 14-1 to win a national championship. It seemed like maybe it was a little bit of a reach. But I like the momentum that they were gathering, albeit against opponents that weren't necessarily the most dynamic in college football. They did have the loss, which stuck with a lot of people. The lasting impression was them somehow ineptly losing to Northern Illinois, but that was really early in the season. Seemed to be a different team. They go ahead and handle. Theory was that Georgia would be too tough for them, and the big boys would lay it on them. And this finesse aspect of Notre Dame, even though they like to run the ball predominantly, that would be exposed, and Georgia would win. But Georgia was going with a really awful backup quarterback, a guy that I would have given no chance. The professor, who you know from the show, said that this guy is as bad as it gets in terms of backup quarterbacks in this kind of a spot. Notre Dame wins. They're favored by 1.5 over a Penn State team that has a reputation for choking in these spots with Franklin. But what do you think? I mean, does the same theory apply, except maybe being executed by a better team here, where Penn State will be able to rough up a little bit of that finesse that you're seeing from Riley Leonard and the boys with the Fighting Irish? What are your thoughts on that game? I'm tempted to take the 1.5 with Penn State. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a phenomenal football game. First and foremost, I think it's going to be so close. I mean, I think the line is dead on. I think you've almost got two teams that are almost clashing of styles. I mean, both defenses are fast. They're hungry. They get to the run. They're really tough to run the ball on. And then you got a team like Notre Dame that likes to run the ball. You got a team like Penn State that likes to run the ball. These aren't teams that are just hucking the ball down the field a whole bunch. So my initial lean, and I will have money on it, would be on the under. I had the under in the Georgia Notre Dame game. That got scary for a second, but ends up ultimately really shouldn't have even sniffed 33 points if you go back and watch that closely. If it weren't for the fumble before the halftime and the punt return, that thing wouldn't have even been close. I think you're looking at a slugfest. 44 and a half is a pretty high number. I think you're probably looking at like a 20 to 13, 16 to 13 type of game. I mean, these defenses are outstanding. The offenses are good, but they just don't have that firepower. In terms of the side Defo, I'm with you. That's a tough one. I'd probably lean grabbing a 1.5 with Penn State. I just think maybe they're the more complete team. Probably make a small argument that Holler's the better quarterback than Leonard. But it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be a dogfight, and I would probably lean on the under 44 and a half.
All right, very good. And slight lean, I guess, although it's certainly not an official peg there from Troy West on Penn State. I'm thinking there are three things that can happen. It's like to talk about a pass play, and two of them in this case are favorable if you like Penn State. One is they could win the game outright, which certainly looms as a possibility. They could also be within, maybe lose a nail biter and lose by a point, so you cover the point spread there. And the other factor would be Penn State. I mean, gets clobbered in this game, or loses by a field goal, and then your money goes up in smoke, and the Fighting Irish move on. Interesting all the way around, and yet that line did go to 2 and a hook, I think, and then came back down. Is that not correct?
Correct. You're absolutely right. Yeah, which is interesting. And then I'll let you obviously bring up the other game, but some weird line movement in that game as well.
Yeah. sort of hovering back and forth between 6 and 5.5, from what I could deduce.
Yeah.
And Ohio State, after losing to Michigan, you would have given them no chance, 0.0 chance of getting this far. They had to take on a Tennessee team, which a lot of people thought, even though I think they were 7.5 point favorites in that game, many people thought Tennessee had a shot to beat them. They destroyed them. And then they completely dissect early on the number one team in the country, the last undefeated team left. Oregon, the Ducks were not quacking at all. I mean, they looked like they'd been involved in the oil spill of the Exxon Valdez. I mean, just stifled completely. They're down 31-0 in the game. So, two extremely impressive performances by Ohio State. Texas, on the other hand, I don't know how you feel about their late season play, but what are your thoughts on this game, Troy West? Is Ohio State the team that we've witnessed the last couple of weeks, or are they capable of reverting back because of Ryan Day being sort of a goofball in these kind of spots of losing to a team like Michigan that had no offense whatsoever?
Yeah, I definitely think the line is a relatively big overreaction to last week. I mean, if you put this line out after Ohio State lost to Michigan and the way Texas has been playing, you'd probably have Texas favored by a couple of points. But now they're looking at last week. They're looking at the collapse of Texas. Oh my gosh, they should have lost the game to ASU. Let's be real. They were up 24-8 in that game. I really dominated 3.5 quarters against ASU. There was a weird momentum shift in that game that got Texas, or excuse me, that got ASU back into it. But I still think ASU, Texas really dominated that football game. Texas is great on defense. They can run the ball. Quinn Ewers, I get it. He's hard to watch sometimes. He's very inconsistent. Sometimes he looks like Peyton Manning. Other times he looks like Drew Lock. So you don't really know what you're getting from him. But I do believe Steve Sarkisian, his Texas team will have they'll be ready to go. I like the line a lot more at 6. When it was at 6, I was thinking I'm going to buy a point or a point and a half and get a touchdown on a hook, and I'll feel pretty good about that. When it's stuck at 5.5, that's a weird line. Probably won't have money on it. I would probably use Texas in some teasers. I think if you're getting them up to 12, 13, 14 points, you're feeling pretty good. I think it's a close game. I think it's going to be 28-24. I think the Buckeyes, if they do play like they did last week, they probably prevail. But I don't know how you can mimic that performance against Oregon. I mean, they looked like, the LSU team with Joe Burrow just a few years ago. That's how good
Yeah.
they look. I'm not sure they can mimic that performance again.
All right. Who do you see emerging ultimately with the title?
Well, I hate to. I mean, I'm not joking. This kind of makes me sick, Defo. I was on several shows at the start of the year, and I picked Ohio State to win the whole thing. I might
Oh,
might
yeah.
have even been on
Okay.
No Filter. I picked Ohio State to win the whole thing. They're obviously the clear cut favorite at this point. They're minus 130 to win the whole thing. But I still think Texas can do it. I think their defense is vastly underrated. They've got a lot of NFL guys on that defense. I think ultimately the winner of this game goes on to win the whole thing. I hope we get a great title. I do think if it's Ohio State versus Notre Dame or Ohio State versus Penn State, you're probably getting Ohio State favored by a touchdown. If Texas Notre Dame go at it or Texas Penn State go at it, that line's probably around 3 or 4. I think Ohio State probably prevails, but Texas I think gives them a heck of a game Friday night.
All right, the people here that might be inclined to sell their tickets to the Orange Bowl game, very happy Notre Dame made it because certainly increased the value. I don't think I'll need to go down to the Turnpike exit there, which I used to with Dolphin tickets when I was getting 20 or 30 tickets to a game from the radio station. I don't think I'll be standing out there. You won't see me out by the entrance to the stadium saying "got two" because these will go easily with Notre Dame being the marquee team here in the Orange Bowl tonight. All right, we have the NFL playoffs coming up. I want to get into that, but before we do, I mentioned this at the top here before you came on. Interesting NBA game. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Cleveland and the Oklahoma City Thunder, two best teams in the league right now. I believe 31-4 and 30-5. The records for Cleveland and OKC respectively. Um, and 2.5 points point spread there. Both teams are on massive winning streaks, double-digit winning streaks. This is the first time. There's always some kind of quantifier. This is the first time in the last 30 years you've had two teams with double-digit winning streaks, clashing together that are also 1-2 in the league. What do you think? Are you inclined to play this game at all?
Yeah, actually, I just sent out my official card, and I did give out the Cavaliers, and I think ultimately the Thunder are the better team. But you look at the Thunder; they've had some pretty daunting games. Their last 4, they had to beat the Wolves, They had to beat the Clippers, the Knicks, the Celtics, and now you got to go face Cleveland. So I think it's more for me playing the exhaustion factor into this one, and then also giving that home court edge to Cleveland. So I think ultimately Cleveland prevails. It's gonna be a great game. Very, very rarely do I get excited for an NBA game, but this will be a good one tonight. I do have a play on the Cavaliers. I just think ultimately, like I said, if you're on a neutral floor or you're going to go a 7 game series, I'll give the edge to the Thunder. But tonight, I'm going to give it to the Cavs just because they're at home and the Thunder have had some, really high energy games, is what I like to call them. They've had some high energy games the last few. Give me the Cavs tonight.
All right, sounds good. Let's get into the NFL now. Wild card weekend always my favorite. Now that you have 6 games, it's even more spectacular because it spreads all the way through the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and into Monday night. Had a conversation with the great Iron Eagle earlier this morning on another show that we do. You can catch on South Florida Live, the Defo show. And Ian always brilliant. He'll be calling the Chargers and the Texans on Saturday. The Chargers, the only road favorite among the teams that are going to be in action over the wild card weekend. Texans didn't seem to really have that same mojo that they did when they were 5-1 at the beginning of the year. And of course, darlings of everybody last year, C.J. Stroud versus Bryce Young. That was the big debate in the draft a couple of years back. It looked to be a unanimous, overwhelming shutout 120-108 decision in favor of C.J. Stroud. Lately, though, what we've seen Stroud have various degrees and levels of struggles, as the Houston Texans team, and Bryce Young actually kind of distinguished himself a little bit with his late season performance for the lowly Carolina Panthers. But I'm a believer in Stroud, and yet of late it hasn't been as pretty. The Chargers with Jim Harbaugh doing exactly what you think they needed to do all along with Justin Herbert, who was also part of a big debate here in town, whether you would take Tua Tagovailoa or Justin Herbert. Most people felt all along that Herbert was the guy. Tua was getting better results with the Dolphins, or so it seemed. But then that really reversed this year as Herbert came under the guidance of Harbaugh, who has historically, throughout his career, always infused a level of energy and a winning vibe into any team that he's joined, college or pro. So how do you see that matchup? Because it would seem like, and nothing worse than gargling with milk of magnesia to start out the NFL playoffs. But the favorite here, only laying 2.5, what would seem to be the superior play. At least that's my thought. I don't know how you feel about Houston at home. And by the way, they always play the Saturday 4:30 home game. I think the last 8 times they've been in the postseason in the wild card, they've played the Saturday 4:30 game. So it's kind of become an annual event there in Houston, or at least of late, continuing what they had going on before when they were good. What do you think? What do you think about the Chargers and the Houston Texans?
Yeah, I'll be honest. My initial thought was exactly your thought: Chargers, Chargers, Chargers. Then
Yeah.
I heard Rex Ryan on the radio. He goes, "This is Harbaugh gets a bye week, right? He's getting a bye week in the first round of the playoffs." I mean, that's what people think of this game. And then it's like, well, then you look at it and go, well, wait a minute, why is that line 3 points then, right?
Yeah.
Why is it not 5, 6, even up to 7? My gut does tell me Chargers, but Defo, you know this just as well as anybody. Vegas isn't stupid. And I've got to think there's going to be a lot of public money coming in on the Chargers. I just can't imagine anybody putting money on the Texans. They're so banged up. Their defense has been up and down. D'Amico Ryans has been very inconsistent with his coaching style. And then on the other side of the ball, you've got a team playing, A-grade football. Herbert's playing outstanding. Harbaugh's coaching at an A-plus level. So it all leads back to why is the line just 3 measly points. So for me, it's a stay away. If you're listening, like I said, looking at it on paper, it's Chargers. I mean, it's the Chargers. There's no doubt about it. But I'd feel pretty dang silly to throw my money on the Chargers and watch the public get buried in this one because I just can't make sense why it's -3. I really can't.
I guess you could factor in 3 points for the home field. So in essence, they're saying 5.5, 6 points. And the Chargers, going to try and ram it down the throats of the Houston Texans. I just they would have to wake up a little bit. They need like an ammonia cap busted. They need Lou Duva in their corner, the Houston Texans, because their last their last several games, half a dozen games or so, they sort of had an element of lethargy there that doesn't lead you to believe that they're primed to win a championship in spite of the great story that they were last year and early on this season. All right, we want to get to your official plays. We touched on a bunch of things here. We want to get a little overview of what's happening. But what do you have for our adoring public out there that can help them ultimately, Troy West, accomplish the goal, which is bury your bookie?
It's an interesting week without a doubt. I mean, this is a as wild of a week as I can remember. I am waiting on injury reports, but I will give out official plays. I'm still waiting to hear the Zay Flowers news. I think that's big news out of Baltimore. If he does not go, I think that's going to be a really good game. I mean, again, you've got Ravens playing good football, Steelers not playing so good football. But Russell Wilson, man, this guy's been in the playoffs before. The guy's won a Super Bowl. You're going to give me 9.5 points in a rival game. Give me the Steelers plus 9.5. I don't, these two teams, the Steelers could be 0 and 14 and the Ravens could be 14 and 0, and it's going to be a close game. Give me the Steelers plus 9.5. And then I'm going to go over to the Packers Eagles game. I think Jordan Love will be a go. I do think Jalen Hurts ultimately plays. If he doesn't play, I'm definitely loading up on the Packers even more. But I like the Packers. You remember this is a team that got in the playoffs last year. They ousted Dallas in the first round. They're getting 4.5 points. Not going to say they'll win this game, but the Packers are a good football team on both sides of the ball. If Hurts does go, he's coming in on two weeks off. Give me the Packers plus 4.5. Love that one. And then last but not least, the Buccaneers. They looked atrocious last week against against the
Saints.
Saints.
Yeah.
Yeah, they looked atrocious last week. I Commanders looked atrocious against Dallas again. The big concern here is Daniels. I mean, my God, the guy gets benched in the last game of the year against the Dallas Cowboys, and now you expect him as a rookie to be ready for the playoffs. Yes, the Buccaneers defense is weak. The secondary is weak, so maybe bounce back as a big game. But I expect Baker Mayfield to be ready to go. 3 is not enough points. Give me the Buccaneers at home against the Commanders.
All right, Troy West all over the pros here. Steelers plus 9.5 in that ball game. Packers getting 4.5 in their matchup, and the Bucks laying 3. I misspoke earlier. The Vikings are also a road favorite, as they're laying 1.5 against the Los Angeles Rams and Sean McVay and company. And it was weird. I'm watching that Detroit line. So much was riding on that Lions Vikings game, and there was so much hype about it. It turned out to be somewhat of a dud early on. It was competitive, but you could see that the Vikings were badly compromised by the fact that. Have you heard anything? I know you have a lot of news sources, Troy West, you and your organization, but has there been an investigation launched into the opposite of the antithesis of Deflategate, where is it possible that somebody put helium in the balls when Minnesota had it? Because Sam Darnold could overthrow a small country the way that he was passing the ball in that game. Jefferson was open any number of times in the end zone. They had to settle for field goals. You knew that wasn't going to last. And sure enough, 21 unanswered by the Detroit Lions. But was that alarming for you, or do you still see the Cinderella ride that Sam Darnold has had resurrecting itself and resurfacing in a more tangible fashion against a Rams team that wasn't overwhelmingly impressive this year, but certainly good enough to be in this spot?
Yeah, I mean that line again. That one scares the living crap out of me, Defo. I mean the Vikings opened at 2.5. I think even it opened as high as 3, and I'm looking at it right now. It's down to 1,
One, okay.
and the total's 47.5. I mean, you got to think there's going to be 80, 90 points scored in that game. I mean, I
Yeah.
mean that just boggles me. That's why to me it's probably a stay away. I can't. I can't picture a scenario where that thing doesn't hit 50 points. I mean, both defenses are subpar. The Rams defense is atrocious. They've given up points all year long, even when they have won games. I would like to think the Vikings go in there and beat them. They're the more complete team. Like you said, Sam Darnold a little bit alarming last week to only put up 9 points in a must win against Detroit. Now it's must win against the Rams. Does he flush it and bounce back? I think he will. And ultimately, if I had to put money on it, I'd go Vikings and over. But that's a weird line to see that much line movement. Sharp money coming in on the Rams was very surprising to me.
Even with guys that essentially were replacements for the largely for the Detroit starters on defense. They got massive pressure on Sam Darnold, and under pressure, he did not respond well. As we saw some of the elements of Sam Darnold that were on display when he was a bust out with the Jets as a number 3 overall pick, and a guy that you can root for very easily. I
Yeah.
was really enjoying this story with Darnold in Minnesota, and interestingly, Josh McCown, who is the quarterbacks coach with Minnesota, now is a candidate for a couple of the head coaching openings, which there were fewer of those available than you would have anticipated. We had a couple of guys, of course, fired, as you do every year in the NFL during the course of the season, but the Black Monday was not the traditional bloodbath that we normally anticipate. All right, quick thought, and of course, our sentiments are with our good buddy Dylan Rossi, who I'm going to try and get on the show during the postseason here, and he's sitting on a $50 parlay, which if the Ravens win the Super Bowl, it'll be a 5-element parlay. He collects $480,000. At what point do you hedge, Troy West? You're not the hedge type. You're not the kind of guy to be running a hedge fund.
No.
No, I mean, do you let that $50? I mean, he bet a total of 600, I guess, on the various tickets he bought. One he already cashed for 90,000 on the 14 parlay, but with all championship caliber teams. For those that aren't familiar with the program here, this is a guy that we know that had UConn win the National Basketball Championship. They win. He had the Panthers to win the Stanley Cup. They win at about 8-1. He had the Celtics at a fairly low price to win the NBA championship, and then cashed it all on the Dodgers to win the World Series. Now, one step further, this is where those pick 5s versus pick 4s at the track really are enticing. One more element, and he goes from cashing 90,000 on 100 to 480,000 on 50. 6-1, Baltimore to win the Super Bowl right now, I think, as the playoffs get underway. What would you do if you were in his spot? Would you be inclined to hedge or just let it ride for a while?
Well, we've got to see what obviously happens this week. You're not going to touch it as a 9.5 point favorite against Pittsburgh, but I
Yeah,
do think if they get by Pittsburgh, you got to see that next matchup. They're likely favored in that one, but I definitely don't think it's the Chiefs here. I think it's probably between the Ravens and the Bills. I'd have a hard time not taking some money if they're gonna. I don't think. Originally, I did think the Ravens were the best team, but as this year has progressed through, I think you can make a pretty strong argument that the Eagles, the Lions, those are two teams that are probably ahead of them. Um, and then I would probably make an argument that the Bills are ahead of them as well. But I wouldn't count them out. I think you really got to play the matchups here, see what happens. But you're definitely not hedging in this first round as a 9.5 point favorite. But I definitely would see what's going on here in the next round. So next week we'll have to kind of discuss where he's at.
good friend of mine who's also a sick degenerate gambler, sends it in pretty heavily. He couldn't have enough disparaging things to say about Lamar Jackson when it gets to this point in the season. And saying
Correct.
that he has been a human blowtorch of money for his backers when they get, and we've seen that historically that the Ravens with Lamar Jackson, in spite of the MVP awards and all the accolades that are well deserved for his play during the regular season, that we've seen him come up and just lay a giant Rodan-sized egg in this spot many, many times. All right, you're killing it, Troy West. And what did you have some kind of religious epiphany or something where somebody spoke to you, some angel, some saint that passed away in the 15th century, came down and whispered in your ear, "Give all of your selections away." Because you're letting the public in on this, and I don't even think you're charging for like some of this stuff. What's
We're
going on
not.
in your
No,
league?
yeah, we're giving people a week free. If you go to the website, troywins.com, you're going to get a big old pop up that says 7 days free. We honor that. That gives you everything. There's no like, oh, you get the 1 star plan and then the buyers get the 5 star plan. No, everybody gets a week free. The reason for that is we want to show you kind of how our customer service is better, how we cover everything at a very high level. It's not just me. We've got a group of guys that really put our heads together each and every day. This is full time for us. A lot of other handicappers have side gigs and other jobs. Not us. It's full time for us. We're really trying to put our integrity behind the product. That's troywins.com.
Yeah, I mean the guy that's driving the golf cart up by A1A here in Fort Lauderdale also has a betting service. Probably less
Exactly.
likely to be on the top of his game than you guys are, where you're living, eating, and breathing this stuff. And then, surprisingly, even this early in the morning on the West Coast, where you are in Seattle, you're not in front of a sportsbook casino betting window, even though it's like 6:30 your time. Troy, always a pleasure, my friend. We'll talk to you again tomorrow afternoon on a program we have
Yep.
on Bleacher Brothers called License to Steal. That's going to be a lot of fun. I think we get you guys to overlap each other a little bit on that show. I know you're a fan of that idea, so we'll try and get
Sure.
a little panel discussion working on that thing. So
Love
looking
that.
forward to seeing you tomorrow, Troy West, and thanks so much for being here with us again in your usual Wednesday spot on Bury Your Bookie.
Thank you, Defo. Appreciate it. Enjoy the week of sports.
All right, always a pleasure. Troy West, ladies and gentlemen. So the recommendations there: Steelers getting 9.5 now. That line has climbed a little bit. Steelers getting 9.5 in their matchup, and they are in tough, obviously, against the Baltimore Ravens, who we're kind of have a vicarious rooting interest in because of our buddy Dylan there and the 480 grand. That's a great score, isn't it? Would it be life changing for everybody? Maybe not, but it certainly wouldn't hurt anything. I mean, that's a lottery ticket right there for hitting 5 championship proposition bets and combining them all into a $150 ticket. Enjoy it, everybody. It's going to be great. We'll have more steam tomorrow. Mike Jones will join us on the show. The professor coming up on Friday. Professor will have a review of the Orange Bowl game and, of course, a preview of what's taking place in the Cotton Bowl with Ohio State and Texas. For Troy West, all the people at NoFilter.net, Greenlight Ventures, and Bet Online, I'm Jeff DeForrest. Thanks so much for tuning in to this morning's edition of Bury Your Bookie.